A great deal of Louis XIV's royal business came from the Court of Versailles in 1982. While the estate itself had previously been a small hunting lodge, Louis XIV expanded and redeveloped it into a magnificent palace that matched his title as the Sun King. It was not only a home to Louis, but also expected that many wealthy French nobility would reside within its walls. It is noteworthy that to the French people that lived there, the primary characteristic of the Court of Versailles was not the opulence, but the terrible smells associated with it. The focus of today is how hygiene was practiced at the Court of Versailles. Before we begin, please remember to subscribe to the Forgotten Realms YouTube channel and leave us your comments with topics related to French history and hygiene that you wish to hear more about. Watch out! Hygiene at Versailles was not good. Unlike society today, people in the 17th century Europe did not think of hot water baths as a luxury and a way to keep themselves clean. Many believed that if someone bathed in a tub of hot water, they were putting themselves in danger by weakening their immune system and therefore widening their pores. In his book on the health of kings, historian Jules Harper states that the average person considered using a basin of warm water to wash his or her body to be healthier and safer than sitting in a tub of hot water. Even King Louis XIV of France was not an exception. In fact, according to some historians, King Louis XIV only took 2 baths during his entire life. That is disgusting. However, this does not mean he did not take care of his body. He brushed himself with a cloth, used perfume and alcohol to scrub his body, and washed his hands daily. Still, the aroma of the type of perfume he used would not have made it easy for someone dining with him to stay comfortable. As mentioned earlier, Louis XIV did not bathe or shower frequently, if at all. He would often just change out of his sweat-soaked shirt and into a clean one, just like that really cool guy you used to hang with during college. Louis was not the only person at Versailles to change their shirts several times throughout a given day. His courtiers were also required to do so, which indicated how wealthy they were as well as their position of importance at court. Even though perfume allowed the wearer to conceal their bad body odor, the use of deodorant was not common until the 20th century. In contemporary times, answering nature's call is something usually done in private. However, this was not the case at Versailles, and Louis would very often have audiences with visitors while on the toilet, just like all other courtiers who were present as well. So much for social tradition. However, there were also chamber pots, commodes located in the individual's bedroom, giving them an option to relieve themselves away from other people's view. The higher your court rank, the more likely you had a wee closet to do your business in your own quarters. As for how the flush toilet came to be, the flush toilet didn't come to Versailles until Louis XV, the Sun King's immediate heir, had one built for himself in 1738. He lived in private quarters that contained commodes and chamber pots, but had to use the public facilities at Versailles. There were many people living and working at Versailles, and the public restrooms provided were totally inadequate to meet the need. Because of the small number of toilets and the large population, these toilets were in constant use and overflowed regularly. Sewage would leak into other rooms nearby through the walls and floors. Because plumbing was limited in Versailles, chamber pots had to be dumped out of windows without any ribs or decorum, or were thrown over the edge of a cliff into the neighboring fields, thus continuing the vicious cycle of sewage disposal in France. Passers-by should take care while navigating the streets. Also, a video covering hygiene during the French Revolution noted that Marie Antoinette got hit by something thrown from above. Human waste. Sacrément dégoûtant. If a chamber pot was not emptied out a window, it would be carried to a nearby cesspool that collected waste. Due to inadequate plumbing and the overcrowded conditions in the palace, Many people working at the palace went to the bathroom when and where it suited their needs. Witnessing someone urinate or defecate would not be unusual. Perhaps most notably, Princess d'Harcourt would not have given anything a second thought if she saw someone publicly urinate. For example, in the year 1702, Princess Elizabeth Charlotte of Germany was horrified by what she witnessed while visiting the French court. In her own words, she wrote that, "It is impossible to go out of our apartments without seeing someone peeing," and "There are people standing on the balconies all day long, pissing in every corner." After years of these public displays, Louis XIV finally ordered his attendants to regularly clean the areas where dirty water had accumulated. Historically, the rancid odors that permeated Versailles were pervasive and unbearable. Eyewitness accounts suggest that the parks, gardens, and chateau were filled with putrid smells so potent as to be capable of inducing a gag reflex. Urine and feces were common in hallways, courtyards, and corridors throughout the entire complex. Stagnant water and dead animals lined the Avenue Saint-Cloud. While the courtiers did attempt to mask the smell using perfume, most of the residents would apply excessive amounts of it to themselves, creating a need to use it for their own protection, as well as for the sake of purifying the air. In reality, this practice actually created even more problems because it simply created another unpleasant odor on top of an already offensive one. All classes were involved in liaisons. When Louis XIV moved to Versailles from Saint-Germain-en-Laye, the your nobles and the workers flocked to Versailles. It was said by people who lived there at the time that the forest that surrounded the palace grounds became an open-air brothel, as you could find sex workers there. Although Louis believed that the immoral behavior of his court was a form of sinful behavior, he was extremely active in policing sex workers and marking them as sinners. In addition to publicly professing to be a moral person, Louis had numerous mistresses and conducted himself in a way that is inconsistent with that which he professed publicly to his subjects. What sort of example is that for a leader? Dental issues plagued Louis XIV throughout his life, but he was left with no teeth when he died in 1715. While Louis's dental issues were significant, they were not uncommon in France. In the 17th century, new sugary confections became widely available in France that were very appealing to wealthy French aristocrats, who seemed to not understand or care about the dental consequences. Consequently, most of them experienced extensive decay. Although having perfect teeth was highly regarded among the courtiers of Versailles, and their ideals of beauty included having bright, white, and regularly spaced teeth, many of the courtiers relied on powders or mouthwashes designed to hide the fact that their teeth were decaying. By the middle of the 18th century, due in part to improvement in dentistry, the health of the mouth became a status symbol for aristocratic class. Louis XIV is reputed to have assisted in popularizing elaborate wigs that the upper class had been using, reportedly as a way of trying to hide his progressively thinning hair. The wigs were not only used to hide male pattern baldness, the wigs also provided protection against lice. Sort of. You see, lice typically infested wigs instead of people's scalps. Therefore, it was much easier to boil a wig infested with lice than to comb lice out of a person's hair. In general, most men shaved their heads to be able to wear wigs and to make lice control easier. Most women, however, did not shave their heads. Food has also been affected by the conditions of hygiene at the Palace of Versailles. Cooks at the palace faced significant challenges as a result of plumbing issues. For example, on several occasions the palace's sewerage system leaked sewage into the private kitchens of Queen Marie Antoinette and poisoned all food there. Although hygiene practices are part of Louis XIV's dining experience, it is likely that on occasion food was not adequately prepared and/or handled. Therefore, as a result of a lack of proper hygienic practices, there were many intestinal parasites living among the courtiers in Versailles, and the king was no exception to this epidemic. It is believed that the king had many infestations from tapeworms, and at least once he was reported as having excreted a parasite that was nearly 6 inches long. Today, Versailles is probably one of the most recognizable sites of the 17th century for a royal court. Originally constructed as a hunting lodge, the location did not have access to running water that would allow for the disposal of waste, and also the ground where the palace sits is known by some people to be made up of shifting sand and marsh. By the time that Louis XIV established the royal court at Versailles, the already poor hygienic conditions of the site worsened dramatically due to the influx of additional courtiers. Louis tended to remain at one location, Versailles, instead of moving among many palaces as had been the tradition of kings in years past. Because of this, the gentleman taking care of all the housekeeping chores had a nearly insurmountable amount of dirt and waste to manage due to the amount of garbage produced by courtiers and others. Clearly, Versailles had become filthy. However, if you were a cat lover, it would have been a wonderful place for you. Indeed, visitors to the Palace of Versailles would have found cats of both domestic and feral varieties throughout the estate. Additionally, a number of court members brought their own cats with them, and because of all the food waste produced by the courtiers, it made for a continuous supply of food for the rodents, thus making for continual rat hunts for the palace's feral cats. Moreover, the presence of so many cats also caused additional sanitation problems, as cat feces could be found all over the grounds of the palace, and the remains of dead cats were often found along the main road in town. The reddish-purple-brown color known as puce received its name around 1775 at Versailles because of a pest. It was in this year that Marie Antoinette wore a gown that had that shade, and Louis XVI jokingly compared it to une puce, a flea. However, the comparison did not deter people from liking the color. In fact, according to Baroness d'Oberkirch, all of the ladies at court wore gowns in puce, including old puce, young puce, ventre de puce, dos de puce, etc. Puce was not the only color to receive a name at Versailles. After the birth of Louis XVI's heir in 1781, courtiers celebrated with a new shade.